Okay, so the 2K DCI dimensions are 2048 by 1080, right? And so what that means is in a lot of cinema cameras, there is a native aspect ratio of 1.9 to 1. And that same aspect ratio is true of the chips that are inside of DCI compliant projectors. So the reason that the sensor in that camera is that size and shape is to be DCI compliant. So you can see that it's 2048 by 858 for scope, 239 to 1. Scope just means 239 to 1. And you can see that that is the maximum x-axis value, right? And in flat, which is just shorthand for 1.85 to 1, is an aspect ratio of 1998 by 1080. So 1080 is the maximum y-axis value. And so this 1.9 to 1 aspect ratio cleanly houses both of these DCI compliant aspect ratios. So that's the reason that 2K DCI is that. So with that said, you can see that in a 2048 by 858 container, cleanly, that's perfectly housing scope. And if you're making a scope film, those are the dimensions you should be using for your final export, 2048 by 858. You can put that into a larger container, but it's just wasteful for other data. You're going to have, black bars on the top and on the bottom, and you're just making your file size unnecessarily large. In contrast, we've got flat, and that's 1998 by 1080. And you can see how if you have a scope file within that container, it does cut off the right and the left portions a little bit, so that's no good. You can have a 1998, you can have what you're looking for, or what you were saying about doing 1920 by 1080. Okay, and I'm just gonna make a new box here. What's the best way to do this? This is something that you already know, but I'm just doing to illustrate the point. So if you see on my cursor, I'm going to make something that is 1920 by, what is it? 1920 divided by 802 or 804. I would probably go to 802. So 1920 by 802. So if you were making a scope film in just like a traditional 1920 by 1080 container, your image would be in here, and you'd have black bars on the top and bottom. And I mean, this is when you're talking about HD, not DCI, two different standards, basically. So this is all well and good, but if you were to make your 239 movie in this container size, this 1920 by 802, I'm just gonna put that on the screen for you, this 1920 by 802 dimensions, right? Those are going to get blown up into 2048 by 858 in order to have the same aspect ratio. So it's the same dimensions, but they are two different sizes. And so if you make a 1920 by 802 export, or a 1920 by 1080 export with letterboxing in it, then that image, the actual usable image in that container, is getting blown up a little bit. You're not really going to see any difference in image quality, but is still technically a degradation of the image. So it's not what I would recommend doing. Yeah, so just to recap, you've got 1.9 to 1. That's your master container that cleanly houses both scope and flat, the two standard aspect ratios that every film gets distributed in. If you got a film that's in like 166 to 1, for example, with the native aspect ratio of Super 16, they would, whatever it is, whatever the size is, they would have it. They would ship it in a flat container, and the image would sit in here like this. Would sit in the flat container, this green bars like that, and that's what the image would look like, and it would be pillar boxed with black, just for example. Anyway, so yes, I would make your final export 2048 by 858 since you're making a scope movie. Cool, hopefully this helps. Let me know if you got any other questions. Totally happy to talk about this.